right then. Are all my judges ready? All right. And the timer? Affirmative team? Roman? Yep. All right. The criterion I presented in my first speech was that of stock issues, and this was accepted by the affirmative team as they failed to respond to it in their last speech. This is what we call a dropped argument. Essentially, we have a term in debate that says silence equals acceptance, or more precisely, omission equals admission. Given the affirmative team admitted this argument from their speech, they admitted it in today's debate round. That's how the debate round works in NCFCA. So we see that the affirmative team has accepted that this round should be weighed through stock issues. So I'm going to be, again, defending that the affirmative team doesn't, in fact, uphold the stock issue of solvency. And we're going to be mainly doing this by looking at a few key arguments that the affirmative team dropped or that they failed to respond to in their last speech. And these are going to be very important arguments going forward in the debate. Let's first take a look at the solvency point of whether or not Russia would ratify. My first argument was that of empirical refusal, talking about the 1992 verdict. And they mainly talked about how it's because the parliament was dissolved and that Russia wants from now. I have one simple response. Failure to pursue. Failure to pursue. If Russia was in fact very interested in a BIT with the United States, they would be adamantly pursuing it with the United States right now. All we have is a quote from 2009 about, oh, we are welcome for a BIT, but no action has been taken by the Russian government to pursue a BIT with the United States. So there's a lack of will by the Russian government for a BIT right now. We're going to take a look at a few more responses that back this up as we go into subpoints B and D, talking about investor protections. They responded by reading a piece of evidence from President Medvedev in 2010 about how he wants investor protection for the United States companies. I have three responses. My first is political motivation. Political motivation. Of course Medvedev is going to say that he wants the United States companies to be protected. But is he really going to take action on this? No. He has a political motivation behind this to please the United States, to make it sound like we have warm relations. To say, U.S., we're not going to try and cripple your companies. We're going to give them protections. This only has political motivation behind it and no actual action. And that's my second response. No action taken. No action taken. The affirmative team's rampant harm is that there's no protection for investors in the status quo. This means the quote from Medvedev in 2010 has absolutely no bearing on today's debate round. Medvedev wasn't serious about providing investor protections for U.S. companies because in the status quo, there still is no protection for these investors, and this quote from Medvedev has no bearing. My third response is corrupt government. Corrupt government. Now we have to look at this logically here. The affirmative team is trying to get a BIT with the goal of reducing corruption through a corrupt government. Is Russia actually going to accept this? No. I'm going to read a quote talking about this from Elliot Glusker, the JD. He was published by the Pepperdine Dispute Resolution Law Journal in 2010. He said, quote, "After Vladimir Putin became president, the Duma hardly ratified any investment treaties. In fact, the possible exposure of the Russian state to arbitration claims will probably make the ratification of new BITs even rarer," unquote. So Russia doesn't want to enter a BIT because it may mean that there may be arbitrations against them, and they may be subject to conform to the laws of international law. And Russia is not going to ratify. This corrupt nation, this corrupt government is not going to ratify a treaty with the goal of reducing corruption from this government. This simply isn't working out here. This isn't logical flow. Now we're going to take a look at the subpoint under my argument that the affirmative team didn't respond to. That was that Russia is rejecting the United States dollar. And this is very, very important in today's debate round because it symbolizes, and the piece of evidence clearly stated, that Russia is trying to avoid the risks that come along with the United States economy. And this was accepted by the affirmative team in the last speech, given they failed to respond to it. So what does the affirmative plan do? The affirmative plan tries to make Russia invest more into the United States. But Russia doesn't want to invest in the United States. Russia doesn't want to become bound to the United States economy. Russia doesn't want to have the risks of the United States economy. So we see this is very, very clear. There is no argument here. Let's look at whether or not there is will for investors. They talked about how there was success with Kazakhstan. However, they dropped the argument I made that investors are not investing in Russia. Kazakhstan has no bearing on this round because investors don't want Russia. Even if the affirmative plan, even if you did vote for the affirmative plan, no action would come about because investors simply don't have the will to invest in Russia. Investors don't actually want to be involved in the Russian economy, given they believe it is not strong enough for them to invest in through it. So there is no increase of investment under the affirmative plan. We provided specific evidence to talk about this. Now finally, solvency point 3 about it was that the 2004 model fails, and this also was dropped by the affirmative team. This also was accepted by the affirmative team. The affirmative team accepted the claim that I made, that the 2004 model was inadequate, and our government is currently revising it to give the best protection that it can offer. So we ask for you to wait for the status quo and allow the proper BIT to come up in the future. Thank you so much. This is Mulder speaking for you in today's debate round.